Hello, it's been quite a while since my last Unity developer video. I just wanted to ease right back into it by doing something very simple. I'm going to be talking about player movement in relation to camera controls and how I've implemented kind of an interesting system with my game. So when we left off last time, I had two enums that were kind of controlling these two separate camera states. This overhead position you can see down there in the game view. And if I hold the mouse button down, it goes into this kind of faux first-person perspective, this close third person, and instead of that overhead position. And I had two enums controlling those, one titled forward camera position and one called overhead camera position. And what I had done before is those enumerators not only controlled the position of the camera at any given point, but the controls being used as well, because if we look at the position on the map, the way I had it before was the controls for the characters, since I had a static camera, the way I had it is if you held forward, the character would be moving forward in the vector in relation to the level. So in no way connected to the player or the position of the camera. So if I held forward, they would move forward in relation to the level, right in relation to the level, kind of like on a global axis. So that wasn't really going to work if I wanted to implement some kind of camera control, some way for them to turn the camera with the input axis of the mouse. So I need to implement a new way to add forces to the player and get those directions that would control which way they're moving. So I had this idea to take an empty object right here, and if I press play, you can see that it is changing position based on the camera, or changing rotation. And what it's actually doing is it is grabbing the Euler angles, the y axis of the camera. So as I turn the camera, it's turning, and its forward vector is also turning. So I can use that as a reference for the controls for the player, because it's completely linked to the camera, so it is using its position completely independent of the enumerators that are in place. So if I hold the mouse button and I go into the first person perspective, it is still connecting to that, so it's still moving. And that's good because the way I had it before is when I switched the enums, it would switch control schemes. So I had that global kind of vector thing where if I held forward, it would move forward in relation to the level. But if I held this first person button and switched to the first person, it would be getting the forward vector based on an empty by the head of the snake. So I'm moving forward based on which way the snake is aiming. And I don't actually need two control schemes anymore if this empty object is just determining the forward vector, because it is going to give me the desired controls independent of what position the camera's in. So as you can see, it's matching the forward position of the camera, and that's how I want it to act in this first person perspective. But if I let go, it is just matching the position of the camera while the camera is away. And that works very nicely. And the reason I need this empty object, I don't know if it's obvious, but I can't just grab the forward vector of the camera, because the camera is facing down. You can see the camera right here. The camera's forward vector is facing into the ground. So if I had gotten the forward vector of that for the controls, it would have been, holding forward would grind the player down into the ground, decreasing forward movement speed. and the reverse movement speed would be much faster, and it would be slightly lifting it off the ground, creating a weird inconsistent jump. So I think that my solution is gets around that very nicely. I think that's all I have to talk about it, but I don't like to assume what people will understand. It seems kind of self-explanatory, but we should just jump into the code and look at it a bit anyway. So I'll just go into my camera manager, and if I select the overhead movement reference, which I'm probably going to change because right now I have the two different control schemes still in place. I haven't updated that yet, but in theory it should control the first person player movement just as well. So I should probably rename this from overhead movement reference to just movement reference or camera movement reference. But if I select it, it's right here, and it's changing the Euler angles to a new vector 3, leaving the x and the z alone, and it's changing the y to the Euler angles of the transform, which is attached to the camera. So that's what's happening there. If anyone's curious on how I'm rotating the camera around the player like that, is I have just a normal empty pivot object, and that object is just an empty object that is placed at the position of the character. So if I select the pivot, there it is. It's just at the character right there, and it rotates when I put mouse input in, and the camera itself, or the overhead position the camera is lerping to, is just a child of that pivot point. So if I just slow down here and I zoom out, as soon as I turn it, the camera is turning around it. And with these improved vectors that are in place because of the new system, if I just hold forward and I turn the camera, I can traverse the level just by holding forward, like how you would normally do it in any kind of platforming game. Of course, you can move left and right independent of the camera like that, but if you want to just keep moving forward and use the camera to get the directions, it works like that, as you can see in the game view down there. And that's very smooth. Once I set the controls to use the vectors of the camera in that first person view, I think it will run even smoother. I'm not sure, but I think that's all I wanted to show in the video. So thanks for watching, and I hope you got something out of it. Thank you. Bye.